Fight Club is a 1999 film directed by David Fincher based on the novel by Chuck Palahniuk. It's the story of a man who, in the midst of a long bout with insomnia, begins attending support group meetings for diseases that he does not have. Opening up allows him to relax, and he is finally able to sleep. When a woman named Marla is found to be doing the same thing, thus ruining his false therapy, his insomnia continues, and he grows more and more unhinged. He meets a man named Tyler Durden, who is, as Tyler puts it, free in all the ways he wishes he could be free. He is attractive, he does as he pleases, and he has a plan. The narrator buys into Tyler's anti-conformist philosophies. They form Fight Club, a place for men to punch each other as a kind of therapy for their troubled lives. The Fight Club eventually spawns Project Mayhem, an anti-consumer, anti-corporate, anti-authority group that terrorizes society at large for its failings. Tyler is revealed to be a figment of the narrator's imagination, a split personality who has taken the narrator's gripes with life to a terrifying extreme. Although the film takes care never to explicitly spoil the plot twist before the big reveal, it does show several clues over the course of the film to subtly allow the audience in on the secret. Tyler appears 6 times before he introduces himself to the narrator. The first 4 are in quick subliminal flashes, and in each instance, his appearance coincides with a moment of frustration for the narrator. First, Tyler emerges when the narrator is endlessly making copies at work. Second, when the narrator is leaving the doctor. Third, during his cancer support group. Fourth, during a tense moment when he sees Marla leaving the therapy session. Fifth, obviously, at the airport. This is the first time we get a good look at Tyler Durden. During this scene, the narrator is performing a voiceover. He says, "Could you wake up as a different person?" Looking back, this telegraphs the twist, and yet we still never saw it coming. Sixth, when the narrator is watching television in his hotel room, the group of waiters on the screen has a familiar face. On the far right, Tyler is there, barely seen. Next, another clue to Tyler's true identity comes in the form of a phone call that cannot ever exist. When the narrator's apartment blows up, he calls Tyler from a payphone, which dates the film a bit, but there is no answer. Immediately thereafter, the phone rings. It's Tyler. Look closer at the phone. It says no incoming calls. This phone call is not happening anywhere except in the mind of the narrator. The phone never rings. As Tyler says later in the film after the reveal, he is everything the narrator wishes he could be. In a sense, Tyler is his opposite. As such, they dress very differently. The narrator dresses very conservatively and traditionally, whereas Tyler is draped in bright colors and hip sunglasses. All except for their boxers. In the beginning of the film, the narrator wears plaid boxers. When he moves in with Tyler, he starts wearing white boxers, same as Tyler. Underneath their clothes, they are the same. When Tyler is fighting the owner of the bar, he gets punched in the stomach, and the narrator doubles over and winces in pain because he's feeling it. We are looking at the same man expressing pain at the same punch. When Tyler and the narrator are talking about their fathers, who is actually the same father, Tyler says that his son going to college was important. The narrator says that this sounds familiar. In this scene, when the car pulls up, the narrator gets in the driver's door, and Tyler follows through the same door, suggesting the narrator will move over to the passenger seat. When the car crashes, Tyler gets out of the passenger side, and pulls the narrator out of the driver's side. In other words, they both, figuratively, were in the driver's seat. The narrator says the line, "I know this because Tyler knows this." The line is even more prominent in the novel. Tyler is the narrator's power animal. There is a penguin in the ice cave. Tyler has a penguin on his shirt when the narrator meets him. The penguin in the cave simply says, "slide." This connects to something the narrator says about Tyler, that he has the ability to let that which does not matter slide. Next, Tyler and the narrator have the exact same briefcase. Coincidence? No. The narrator says, quote, "Tyler's words coming out of my mouth," unquote. He also says that sometimes Tyler spoke for him.
Sometimes Tyler spoke for me.
Fell down some stairs.
Tyler asks the narrator if he would like to finish off Marla. She then asks Tyler who he's talking to. And finally, when the narrator is beating himself up in front of his boss, he remarks that this reminded him of his first fight with Tyler. This is because, in reality, the narrator was beating himself up then as well. There are a massive amount of clues, and yet this is considered one of the greatest twists of all time. We didn't see it coming, but we were told over and over and over again, in subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways, that the narrator and Tyler Durden are the same man. A good twist should have two components. It should take you by surprise, and after the revelation, it should all instantly make sense. You should wonder why you never noticed. A bad twist is something unexpected, but was never clearly hinted at, never strongly suggested. A good twist is the conclusion of a build-up. It is integral to the story. If the twist never happened, the film would be incomplete. M. Night Shyamalan's The Village contains a bad twist. The film could have ended completely differently, with the twist simply being that the town elders used the legend of the monster to keep people inside the village because they wanted a seat of power somewhere. Instead, we got what we got. It felt forced. The twist in Fight Club is so revered because 99% of us did not expect it, unless we read the novel. But looking back, it makes so much sense that it's almost shocking that we missed it. That's the beauty of it. That's the skill of the director. It should be noted that the multiple personality twist had been done before, and has been done since, but ever since Fight Club, the twist has become overdone, and typically has been the crutch of hack writing. In 2014, we can look back on Fight Club and say, oh, that old twist, been done to death. And while that's true, it had not been done to death in the 90s. It became played out around the turn of the millennium. Fight Club, released late in 1999, was about the last time it could be used properly. Anyway, the narrator having another hidden personality is one of the ways in which Fight Club discusses the loss of individuality and identity in the modern world. In the film, loss of identity manifests itself quite literally as the narrator is two people. This tells us that we don't actually know ourselves, the real person beneath the surface, that what we think we are is a product of what other people tell us. There are other ways in which the film tells us about our lack of personal identity. For example, the narrator always uses a fake name when he attends support group meetings. Marla calls him on this, mockingly calling him by various names. The narrator wears a variety of name tags, but it goes beyond that. He is taking on the identity of someone with a disorder, someone with testicular cancer, someone with brain parasites, all manner of things. He is pretending. He is putting on the identity of someone else to get by. The support groups help him sleep. This helps him live. Being someone else helps him live. The film is showing us, rather bluntly, that we disguise ourselves as others, attach ourselves to more attractive identities to get through.
Doesn't have your name. Who are you? Cornelius? Rupert? Travis? Any of the stupid names you give each night?
The narrator does not have a name, at least not one we explicitly see. When the narrator addresses himself to Tyler, he does not introduce himself by name. He says, "We met on the plane. I'm the clever guy, remember?" Lack of identity. Of course, the character does have a name in this world. He wasn't born without one. And no matter how hard one tries, it can never be confirmed that his name is Jack, nor is it actually Tyler Durden. This is confirmed by something Tyler says during the big reveal. He is listed as narrator in the ending credits, for a reason. One can argue what his name is forever, but that's not the point. The point is that the fact that we are even having an argument about what his name might be is proof of loss of identity. By the audience never knowing his name, and by the narrator never feeling it necessary to introduce himself, we get a sense of the ongoing thread, this lack of identity, this feeling of unimportance. It's funny because the audience can go the entire movie without even realizing that the narrator never properly introduces himself, and nobody ever calls him anything except his alter ego. This is because we are so accustomed, when discussing most films, to use the name of the actors rather than the characters. Unless the character is iconic like Indiana Jones, we are about as likely to use the actor's name when talking about the film. If we talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark, we say, "And then Indiana Jones runs away from the boulder." But if we are discussing Air Force One, we say, "And then Harrison Ford goes, 'Get off my plane,' because we forget that his name is James Marshall in that movie." In other words, the way we think about films and discuss them, we may not even recognize the character having never explicitly introduced himself as Jack or Joe or whatever. We may not realize this when reading the novel either, but that is because it's in the first person. In doing this, we, too, experience taking away someone's individuality by not acknowledging that the narrator has a name, that he is a person. Moving on, the narrator feels, in the beginning of the film, that he was, as he put it, nearly perfect because he had a respectable wardrobe and the best IKEA furniture. Tyler Durden spells it out in more explicit terms.
You were are not special. You are not a beautiful or unique snowflake. You are the same decaying organic matter as everything else.
Tyler explains that we are lied to about our identity. We are told lies about what we could be when we grew up. Everyone's parent or teacher told us this lie. You can be anything you want. An astronaut, a millionaire, or president of the United States of America. Of course, few men and women will have the qualifications to be astronauts, and even fewer will be selected for such a rare position. That goes double for president.
We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. We're very, very pissed off.
Getting back to the loss of identity, let's look at how Fight Club uses soap to that end. In the marketing for the film, posters would show Brad Pitt holding a bar of soap. Yet, before seeing the film, we would have no idea about why this was. Why would Brad Pitt be holding soap in a movie called Fight Club? In the film, Tyler Durden sells soap. He tells the narrator this almost immediately after they meet. The narrator is not aware of how it's made, though. Later in the film, Tyler and the narrator steal human body fat from a dumpster. It's what's left over from liposuction. Why is this important? Well, narratively, it's important because it explains how Tyler can fund his life and later Project Mayhem. It also explains how he can make explosives. He tells the narrator that ingredients in soap are part of a formula to make a bomb. But beneath the surface, what does this say about identity? Well, some would say Tyler using human runoff is foreshadowing to using human beings in Project Mayhem. Truly using them, brainwashing them, having them do your dirty work under the false notion that this is a revolution, and that their lives would be incomplete without it. However, a larger component to this is seeing human beings as garbage, as waste, seeing human beings in their deconstructed form. Remember what Tyler said, "We are made of the same decaying material as everything else." He is upset that the world told them, through television and advertising, that they would grow up to be, as he put it, movie gods and rock stars. Instead, they are just the same decaying material as everything else. Broken down, they too could be fatty goo that fits in bags in a dumpster. And that brings us to what Fight Club says about our culture of consumerism.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
We are the middle children of history. The middle children of history, what does that mean? Well, for teenagers, 20-somethings and 30-somethings living in the mid to late 90s, there was no great conflict in America. We weren't afraid of Russia anymore. The Cold War ended years ago. The first Gulf War was a couple years prior, and though devastating for those who waged it, the war lasted about as long as a cup of coffee. The economy was amazing, but success breeds complacency. Tyler is talking about having no Great War or Great Depression keeping them down, but that means that the corporations rule everything. We are focused on ourselves. Industry and advertising are aware of this.
What are we then?
Consumers.
Right. We are consumers. We are byproducts of a lifestyle obsession. Murder, crime, poverty, these things don't concern me. What concerns me are celebrity magazines, television with 500 channels, some guy's name on my underwear.
Fight Club, in many respects, is about rampant consumerism. Now, this is not the first film to tackle such a subject, nor will it be the last. However, Fight Club handles it better than most, and the consumerism tackled in this picture may be specific to the 90s. Major corporations are mentioned in the film, but none so much as Starbucks. Director David Fincher actually played a joke on us, or a clue, or a commentary, or something. In every scene in the film, there is a Starbucks coffee cup. Fincher claims one can be found everywhere, but finding them all is an arduous task. They are sprinkled throughout the film, some noticeable in the foreground, some hidden in the background. But what does this say? Before the popularization of Starbucks, the idea of paying more than a couple dollars for a cup of coffee was unheard of. Somehow, Starbucks tapped into some part of our society that thought that paying more meant getting a better product, and the company flourished. Before this, the saying, "that and a quarter will buy you a cup of coffee," made sense, because coffee was cheap. We all bought ground-up coffee at the supermarket for nothing a barrel, and that was how we started our day. Now, we don't. We go to Starbucks or McDonald's or something similar. We are charged more for roughly the same. That has become our societal standard. In the 90s, we can make jokes about the proliferation of Starbucks. Now, it's both played out and unfunny, because we all accepted that we can and will be charged for our Starbucks Super Mocha whatever, and we buy it anyway. The jokes are played out, and they are no longer funny because we are very much the butt of the gag. But Fight Club was a film of the 90s, so this was very relevant. Fight Club is about consumerism, and yet Fight Club says very little about the force of capitalism and its effects. It says nothing of unemployment and corporate cost-cutting that inevitably leads to cutting jobs rather than resources, expansion, or CEO paychecks. It speaks to corporate greed by explaining the mathematics behind whether or not a major car company institutes a safety recall based on cost-effectiveness rather than actual care for human life. That much is true. However, it fails to get into the deeper impact of capitalism. Of course, that is because Fight Club is less about capitalism itself and more about the social and emotional impact of how we view products, how we associate wealth and possessions with the manner in which we view ourselves. Fight Club does not focus on unemployment and the greater hardships of where corporate greed can bring us, and though that may be a failing of the film, it does focus on the more emotional element, the more spiritual element of where that greed leads us. Fight Club is about our dependence on companies and what our dependence on belongings means to us as human beings, as actual people and not target demographics.
Things you own end up owning you.
At first, Tyler Durden's rejection of worldly possessions, of desire for wealth and belongings, is vaguely Buddhist. Craving, wanting, is said to be a failing in that religion. It is the cause of all suffering. Desire leads to unhappiness. Eliminating craving leads to greater personal happiness, to ultimate enlightenment and personal peace, a state in which the Buddhists call nirvana, a stillness of mind after the flames of want and desire have been extinguished. And while this is a noble and challenging goal, Tyler does not adhere to it, at least not for very long. His end goal, Project Mayhem, is violent, not pacifist. It contains vandalism and explosions and devastation. He is more than an activist. He believes that the world should conform to his philosophies, which are, in extremes, more than troubling. Tyler's rejection of modern society, of the consumer culture, is very appealing to the audience. We all want to break off the shackles of office jobs and cornflower blue ties, and do something more meaningful or more self-fulfilling with our lives, and that is all perfectly fine. This is part of the appeal of both Fight Club the film and Fight Club the philosophy. In fact, the notion of a place to release our aggressions is also very attractive, enough that everyone who watches the film remembers the Fight Club scenes, and everyone remembers the rules.
The first rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is, you do not talk about Fight Club.
But the story also warns us about the extremes of this, and that sometimes goes unnoticed for those who buy into the first two acts of the film, but disregard the warnings laid out in the third. The narrator and Tyler Durden are two extremes. The narrator is so obsessed with the ownership of largely pointless commodities that he actually defines himself and his worth as a person by his own material possessions. He says, quote, "What kind of dining set defines me as a person?" Unquote. Tyler is the other extreme. Anarchy in the face of what everyone is trying to do, make a paycheck and get by. The film makes Tyler's point of view more appealing, but he is eventually proven to be a criminal and as uncaring as the company that laughed at the burned up car passengers. When Bob dies, Tyler brushes it off and says, "You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs." That's cold. Bob was a human being. The film is not about validating extremism. It's at least partly about the dangers of it. Project Mayhem is actually inspired by the very real Cacophony Society, of which Chuck Palahniuk was a member. The group is actually mostly harmless and more about anti-conformist pranks. The Cacophony Society is just performance art. Speaking of art, it comes up a few times in the film. Early on, the narrator is examining a car accident in which the passengers died. His associate jokes that the man's body fat melting into the car seat is like modern art. This has a few things. First, it is foreshadowing to Tyler and the narrator using body fat to make soap and explosives. Second, it shows the lack of compassion of the company for this human life. Third, it shows a mocking, intellectually incurious view of art. To some, art is meaningless. To others, it is life-reflected. The corporation cares nothing for art because it cares nothing for life, at least in this film and at least to the narrator and Tyler. Later, we see Project Mayhem destroying corporate art because they find the idea of a giant company co-opting the idea of art itself to be offensive. Fight Club also touches on gender and masculinity. In one scene, Tyler and the narrator see an underwear advertisement with a skinny, seemingly effeminate man, and jokingly say, "Is that what a man looks like?" Tyler and the narrator say that they are a generation raised by women. Making Fight Club allows them to return to a traditionally male form of recreation, entertainment, and measure of self-worth: violence. Of course, the film is also telling us that it is not women who failed men, but men themselves. The narrator says that his father left him and his mother, and that his mother had to raise him. Of course, none of this seeming lack of male gender identity would have happened if the narrator's father had, well, been a man and raised his own child. Fight Club has been accused of being misogynist, but the film is actually far more critical of men than women. It also shows the extremes of so-called violent male thinking and where it leads us. It speaks about gender, but it feels more about how we, in a gender-neutral sense, have failed ourselves in a cyclical fashion.
His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson. This is over with. His name is Robert Paulson.
Another way to view Fight Club is through queer theory, meaning the analysis of texts and films with homosexual undercurrent or something more explicit. Fight Club is often seen as the narrator struggling with his own sexuality. Tyler Durden is the manifestation of the narrator's romantic and sexual desires. The narrator is closeted, not only to the world, but perhaps to himself. He blocks it from his mind. He suppresses who he really is, and due to the incredible stress of his life and his secret, he forms a new person inside of him. He and his new friend share an intimacy together. They live together, they bathe in each other's presence, they share their deepest thoughts, and they share a physical life together, although not in sex, but with fighting. One night, they get drunk, and one of them asks the other if he wants to do something neither of them has ever done before, just for kicks, and they do. And they love it. And they smoke cigarettes afterwards. Fighting is a safe way for the narrator to engage with other men. Fight Club is a group of men meeting in secret to be physical with each other without their wives and girlfriends knowing about it.
Where'd you go, psycho boy?
I felt like destroying something beautiful.
Tyler saying things like not needing another woman is not so much about being a misogynist, it's about being a homosexual. Plus, there are a lot of little jokes or hints about their relationship. After a fight, the narrator says, "We should do this again sometime," a one-night stand line. The narrator likens his relationship with Tyler to Ozzie and Harriet, a married couple. In this scene, Tyler kisses the narrator on the hand. The narrator doesn't exactly pull away either. When the narrator sees Tyler being friendly with another man, he looks noticeably jealous and hurt. Tyler says, "Something on your mind, dear?" to the narrator. The narrator says, "I'm all alone. Tyler dumped me. I am Jack's broken heart." Also, whatever this is. All that and the fact that the narrator does not like being touched by Marla, but feels very comfortable in the waiting breasts of Bob.
And then something happened. I let go. Lost in oblivion.
Another way to watch Fight Club as a gay film is that Tyler Durden is not the narrator's homosexual companion, but his desire to be a heterosexual. The narrator blends into groups where he is an outsider and a fake in the beginning of the film. When he can't do that anymore because of Marla, he invents Tyler to be the idealized straight man he wishes he could be. Tyler has sex with Marla. The narrator does not, and even seems repulsed by her. Either way, there does seem to be gay subtext in the film, and it may not be accidental. Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club, is openly gay. This interpretation of the novel comes partly from the text, and partly from the life of the author. This interpretation of the film practically leaps off the screen.
That's an interesting theory.
One famous critique of Fight Club is that it was, quote, anti-capitalist, anti-society, and indeed anti-God. Anti-God? No, not exactly. Let's look at the scene that must have spawned this thought.
Our fathers were our models for God. If our fathers bailed, what does that tell you about God?
Admittedly, that does sound rather maltheistic, but not atheistic. Were it atheistic, it would be the simple denial of the existence of an intelligent creator. It sounds maltheistic because it acknowledges a creator, but paints him in an unflattering light. However, it should be noted that Tyler is really only referring to God as parents, or perhaps the figureheads of society. They are unwanted children of society, not God. This speech isn't about religion in the strictest sense, it's about our very tangible and provable reality. God is probably not meant literally, based on the context of what Tyler is actually saying. Tyler Durden has become a kind of icon for men, particularly straight men, which is strange considering the subtext of the film. It's as if those who watch the film choose to ignore where Fight Club leads. This needs to be clarified. Tyler Durden is not someone to be mimicked.
We have front row seats for this theater of mass destruction. The demolitions committee of Project Mayhem wrapped the foundation columns of a dozen buildings with blasting gelatin.
It is incredibly stupid to drive without touching the steering wheel, in the rain, with passengers, going really, really fast. You will crash, and they do crash. Tyler is not someone to be admired or put on a pedestal. Bits and pieces of his philosophy may have some accuracy, but they flow throughout the film, allowing you to decide which parts make sense. But these things, like most philosophies, are not meant to be taken to extremes. Feel that corporations don't care about your well-being? Fine, there's probably a lot of truth in that. Boycott individual major corporations, or even live a more minimalist lifestyle. Just don't go too far. Tyler is the villain. This could not be clearer. The narrator is willing to shoot himself in the face just to get rid of him. It should be noted that when a viewer is deciding what Fight Club means to him or herself, he or she does not have to pick and choose. You take what you want from it, or you can accept it as a whole. Fight Club's ambitions are lofty. It's a film that can represent and examine various aspects of our humanity. A film from which one can build philosophies and see the totality of our lives. The best films reach for these goals, to change us, to make us view the entire world differently, or to represent the entire human experience within the course of about 2 hours. Or it's about dudes punching each other for fun. That works too.